Hello everyone, welcome to my channel and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. This is another episode in my gemstones and crystal videos that I've been doing, and I hope you've been watching all the other videos that I've done on them and have found them very interesting. So this is part 2 in the 4 C's of gemstones. In the previous video, part 1, I discussed carat weight, and today I am going to be discussing color of a gemstone. Now color is the most critical value setting factor of a gemstone. All gemstones have a preferred color. So we prefer our emeralds to be green, our sapphires to be blue, and we want our rubies to be red. And any deviation from this norm will affect the price of that gemstone. So it can either raise the price or it can actually devalue the gemstone depending on the color of that gemstone. Now the color is important also from a spiritual point of view because it determines the vibration and the power of that gemstone. So we associate purples with spirituality, greens with healing, we want pinks for love, and reds are associated with power and grounding. So why do we see color? So I thought I'd just talk about the eye very quickly because I think this is very important when understanding how we see color. So our eyes are said to be the windows of the soul, and they're very unique because not only are we able to detect light and dark, but we can also appreciate all the beautiful colors that there are in the world. Scientists estimate that the human eye can see up to 10 million colors, and this is absolutely phenomenal. And how does the eye work? Well, when the light hits an object, some of the light is absorbed by the object, but some of it is not absorbed and is reflected off the object. That reflected light enters the eye through the cornea. It goes via the pupil, through the lens, which focuses the light rays onto the retina, which lies at the back of the eye. The retina collects all the information that it's received and it sends it via the optic nerve to the brain. Now, the retina is a very important part of the eye. It is a very thin layer of cells at the back of the eye, and it is composed of 2 cells. And I've drawn this diagram here. You can see it's got 2 cells, and they are the rods, which look like rods, and the cone cells, which look like upside down ice cream cones, really. The rods themselves detect the light and the dark, whereas the cones detect the color. And they detect the color because they have these color detecting molecules or color detecting pigments within them. And these pigments are changed when they are exposed to light, and they are able to allow that cell to generate a signal that will eventually go through the optic nerve to the brain and be seen as color. Now, why are gemstones colored? Well, white light is composed of many different wavelengths, or a spectrum of wavelengths. And these wavelengths are associated with each individual color. So there are 7 colors of light, and each color of light has an individual wavelength. And I did discuss wavelength in a previous video. And wavelength, light is a wave, and wavelength was the distance between the 2 peaks. And you can see that red light has a longer wavelength than violet light, which has a shorter wavelength there. So these different wavelengths themselves interact differently with the gemstone, and these wavelengths can either be absorbed, reflected. Some of them are absorbed and re-emitted by the gemstone, and these wavelengths all appear as different colors to us. Now, what happens at an atomic level within the crystal is that the light comes into the crystal, enters the crystal, and this is an example of an atom, or a diagram of an atom within the crystal. Before the light enters, the atom is at a ground state, a low energy state. Once the light hits the atom, it interacts with the electron that is going around the nucleus. The electron then jumps to a higher level or more excited state, it puts the atom into an excited state, and it gives off a burst of energy, which is a photon or a burst of energy of light, and that is the color that we see. When this atom goes back down to its low energy state after you remove the light, it also emits a photon of energy, and that we also perceive as color. Now, the color of a stone is very unique to each gemstone itself. And the spectrum of the absorption of light by the gemstone is known as the selective absorption of light. And like I said, it is very, very individual to a particular gemstone. So the color of the gemstone that we see is actually what is going on here in this interaction. And it is either the light being reflected or absorbed and re-emitted as a new wavelength. That is how we see color on the gemstone. If the light passes completely through the gemstone without being reflected or being absorbed, we have a clear gemstone. So it's going right through the gemstone. It's not interacting very much with the atoms. So the atoms are not absorbing it, they're not changing the wavelength, and we see it as a clear crystal. If the light gets absorbed completely within the gemstone, we see it as a black crystal. So the light is completely absorbed over here. It's not being transmitted, it's not being emitted, it is being completely absorbed by the gemstone, and that is why we see it as black. So those are the two ends of the spectrum, going right through or being absorbed. Now, the colors of the gemstone lie between those two extremes of being absorbed or emitted, or transmitted through it. The color of the gemstone itself, therefore, can change when you change the light source being shone on it. So if the light is very intense, you'll get a very, very vivid color of a gemstone, and if it is not so strong, you won't see the gemstone as vividly. So ideally, it would be preferred that a gemstone does not vary its color according to light source. So we want ideally what we want is the gemstone's color to remain stable despite whatever light we put on it. So if we want it to look pink, we want it to look the same in an intense light as well as in a darker situation. So that would be the ideal that we prefer. Now, let's talk about how we actually assess color within the gemstone. So there are many different systems for assessing color within the gem industry, and there's no universal standard, which is a pity. And this is because no two people perceive color the same way. We have as a result of this, we have many different systems in place, and this can end up being very, very confusing because they vary so vastly. These systems of color assessment vary so vastly. But there are three factors that are basically used to assess color, and this is hue, tone, and saturation, as you can see. So what is hue? Hue is the dominant color that we see when we first look at the gemstone. So it would be our first impression of a gemstone. For instance, if you see this color as blue, this would be the dominant color. This would be the hue of that sapphire blue. So the hues can occur in primary colors, so they can be in red, blues, or greens. Or they can be in combinations of colors. So if you've got purple over here, you've got a combination of blues and reds, giving you that purple color, and that would be a secondary color. You've got oranges here, and that would be a combination of colors, or even the greens can be combinations of colors, of primary colors, to give you those secondary colors. So that would be the first impression that we see when we see hue. Now, tone of a stone would describe how light or dark the stone is, and I have an angelite stone over here, which is a very, very light blue, and a very, very dark blue sapphire over here, and you can see the distinction. The dark blue sapphire here has got more black, so the tone refers to how much of black or white is within the color of that gemstone. So the dark blue would suggest that it has a lot more black within that coloring, whereas this lighter blue would suggest that it has more white within the coloring. So this would be the different tones of a gemstone. The more medium tones are preferred within gemstones. People prefer to have middle of the road colors as opposed to a color being too dark or a color being too light, and this affects the price in itself. So if you have a light sapphire like this and you have a dark sapphire like that, this light sapphire would be much more desirable and would be priced higher than this dark sapphire here. Now, the third factor that is very, very important is saturation, and this refers to how vivid the color of that gemstone is. Now, I have got a bracelet here in citrine and a necklace here in citrine, and they're both the same gemstone, but you can see this citrine necklace has got a much more vivid yellow color to it, as opposed to this citrine here, where the color is a bit more washed out. This citrine also has got is more translucent, so the light is going through it, as opposed to this citrine, which is more opaque. So gemstones that have vivid color and are more transparent are much more desirable than gemstones that are opaque with a duller color. So this is the color saturation that we're looking at. We prefer gemstones with higher color saturation, and that affects the price of the gemstone. So it puts up the price the more saturated the color is. So if you've got, I've got a amethyst bracelet over here. This is a very light pink versus a dark pink, dark purple amethyst. It's more preferable, this darker purple is more preferable color as opposed to the light pinky tones of that amethyst. So if you had to be buying amethyst, most people would prefer to buy this more vivid colored purple amethyst as opposed to this really light pink amethyst here. So saturation also affects the pricing of that gemstone. Now finally, there are within gemstones, there are families of gemstones. So corundum is a family, sapphire family, and within the sapphire family itself, you'll find that there are many different colors of sapphire. And the reason for this is because of the presence of different metal ions within that gemstone. So the different colors of sapphires will have different kinds of metal ions in them. So you've got a blue sapphire. I've got a blue sapphire here. I've got a yellow sapphire and a pink sapphire. Now they all have the same characteristics, the same hardness, the same chemical structure. The variation comes in the fact that they have different metal ions within them. So within the blue sapphire, you're going to get a lot more titanium, which gives it its blue color. The yellow sapphire has got a lot more aluminium in it, and the pink sapphire has got a lot more chromium in it, and that varies the color of it. So this is how color varies within the same family of gemstone. It depends on the metal ions within the gemstone itself affecting the color of that gemstone. So that is something also to keep in mind when you're buying gemstones. You can get different colors within the same family, and I've got a nice example here of a citrine gemstone, and this has got all the different colors with it. You can see clearly, I'll put it against the white background, and you can see that they have got different concentrations of metal ions within that gives it their different colors, and that leads to a vast variation of color within the same family in itself. So that is also something to take note of. The two necklaces next to it are also of the same family, but you can see they've got different colors within. So you're going to have variation of color in itself within the families, and that is something to take note of. So finally, I just wanted to talk about what you need to do when you're actually purchasing gemstones. So there are two factors that you should, two things you should do when you are purchasing gemstone jewelry. The first being that whenever you're looking or viewing gemstones, look at it against a white background. So this is absolutely essential, I think, when you're purchasing anything. The reason, or purchasing any kind of stone really, the reason why you do this is because the white background does not distort the color of that gemstone. You can actually see the true color of the gemstone when you have a white background. So most jewelry stores tend to display jewelry against black velvet backgrounds these days. If you are buying something, ask them to show it to you against a white background. So you can put a piece of paper, a white piece of paper behind it to actually see the true color saturation within that gemstone. So this is the first thing that you should do. The second thing is considering the light source that you are viewing the gemstone under. So in most jewelry stores, they have bright artificial lights, and it's usually a spotlight on that gemstone. And this is all well and good because you get to see the complete utmost potential of that gemstone, exactly what it can give you as far as color goes. It also gives you the opportunity to see if there's any flaws within the gemstone, and also gives you the opportunity to see how uniform the color is when you're looking at it under a spotlight. So you have a thing called color zoning, where the gemstone color may not be uniform throughout the gemstone. So you might have bits of a gemstone, like with these emerald beads. You can see some areas of the bead is very dark. I don't know if you can see that. Some of the areas of the bead is really dark, and some areas are very light. So the color within this gemstone is not uniform, and you've got color zoning going on over here. This is not desirable. You really do want to purchase a gemstone that has a uniform color. As with this emerald, you can see all the stones are pretty much of the same intensity throughout the stone. So that's why it is important to look at it under those very intense lights. The other thing that you do need to do is ask to view the gemstone under natural light. So take it to a window, somewhere where you can actually view the gemstone under natural light. And this allows you to see what the gemstone is going to look like in everyday light. So if you're using that piece of jewelry as an everyday piece of jewelry, you want to see it under natural light as well as artificial light, and simply because gemstones can change when viewed under a natural light. So if, for instance, this is a tanzanite ring, the stone tanzanite varies. If you have it under artificial light, like I have it right now, it appears beautiful and blue. But when it goes under daylight, it starts appearing purple. So be aware that gemstones can change their characteristics depending on the intensity of the light. So they do change, and they can change their color depending on the intensity of the light. So it is very, very important that you view the gemstone in the extremes of light situations. So under artificial light as well as natural light, to get a true idea about what that gemstone color is about. Now, having said all of this, at the end of the day, the choice of the gemstone depends on how much the gemstone appeals to you. And, knowing that you can, make an assessment of it using the hue, tone, and saturation factors, at the end of the day, that gemstone selection is going to be on how much you resonate with it and how much you like it. And so don't let anybody else's opinions sway you. You should always go by what you want out of a gemstone, or how much it appeals to you when you are selecting a gemstone. Now, I hope that you have found this video very, very informative and have enjoyed it. And please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and leave me some comments as well. And thank you so much for watching. Take care now. Goodbye.